I can't pay this month. She said it standing on my porch on the 3rd of May with her hands pushed down into the front pocket of a work fleece, not looking at me, the way you say a thing you've rehearsed in the car. And I said, "That's all right." And she said, "Gene, it's not all right. I'm 2 weeks late already and I've got—" And I said it again, "Corinne, that's all right." Something in the way I said it the second time made her stop. She looked up at me properly for the first time. I want to tell you what was in the top left-hand drawer of the roll-top desk in my front room while that conversation was happening. 14 checks, hers, $675 each. Every one of them signed, dated, and never deposited. The oldest one was 14 months old. She'd been writing them and I'd been taking them off her and putting them in a drawer, and I had not said one word about it to her or to anybody else in 14 months. My name is Gene Talbot. I'm 49. I live in Marietta, Ohio, and I work the counter at a hardware store on Front Street, and I own 3 small rental houses that my father bought in the 70s and left to me, which sounds like more than it is. It's about $900 a month after taxes and repairs, in a good year, and last year was not a good year. Corinne Vale rented the little 2-bedroom on Warren Street. She'd been in it 4 years. 34 years old, 2 kids, Wyatt, 16, and Nell, 9. And she worked at a distribution center out on Route 7 and picked up weekend shifts at a place that does event catering. She paid by check because she didn't do online banking, which I used to find quaint and which I now understand was a decision about not being able to look at the number. And in 4 years, she was late exactly twice, both times by 3 days, both times with a note. So here's why the drawer. My wife left in March of last year. Deborah, 22 years. And I need to be accurate about this, because the sympathetic version isn't true. There was no other man. She didn't clean me out. She didn't do one single thing wrong. She sat at our kitchen table on a Sunday and told me that she had been alone in that marriage for about 6 years and had decided she'd rather be alone somewhere better, and she went to her sister's in Columbus on the Tuesday. And I did not tell anybody. I have no children. My brother's in Arizona and we talk at Christmas. I went to work at the hardware store on the Wednesday morning, and I stood behind that counter for 11 days before anybody said anything to me about anything, and the thing they eventually said was about a delivery. That's not self-pity. That's just the arithmetic of a man who never built anything outside his own house. On the 4th day, Corinne Vale knocked on my door with a foil dish. I don't know how she knew. I've asked her since, and she says Deb's car wasn't there, and my curtains hadn't moved in 3 days. Which is the whole of it. She lived 4 streets over. She noticed my curtains. She said, "This is chicken and rice, and you don't have to talk to me," and she put it on the step and left. Then she did it again on the Sunday. Then my bins started going out on Wednesday nights, and I hadn't put them out, and I stood at my window one Wednesday at about 9 and watched a 33-year-old woman who worked 2 jobs walk 4 streets in the rain to drag my garbage down to the curb. She never once asked me if I was okay. Not one time in 3 months. She just kept showing up and putting things down and leaving. And I want to give you the specifics, because she was kind to me is the kind of sentence that slides straight past you, and the specifics are the reason I did what I did. The foil dishes were the smallest part of it. There were maybe 9 of those. In the 2nd week, the light over my back step went out, and I did not replace it, because it was a bulb and a ladder and I could not make myself do either. On the Friday it was working. She never mentioned it. She'd bought a bulb. In April, my grass got to about 8 inches, which in that neighborhood is the kind of thing people talk about. One Saturday I came back from the store, and half of it was cut, the front half, and her son's bike was on my drive, and Wyatt was 15 years old, and doing the back with a mower he'd clearly wheeled 4 streets. I went out and offered him $20, and he said, "My mom said if you offered me money, I'm not allowed to take it." Which is a hell of a sentence to hear out of a 15-year-old. And in May, this is the one, I got a phone call at the hardware store at about 2 in the afternoon from a woman I did not know, who turned out to be Corinne's supervisor at the distribution center, asking if I was Gene Talbot and if I could confirm I was all right, because one of her people had come in that morning worried and wouldn't settle. I'd been in bed for a day and a half and hadn't answered my door. I said I was fine. I went home that night and stood in my kitchen for a long time. The checks started on the 1st of April, 3 weeks after Deb left, and they came on the 1st of every month after that without fail. I took every one of them. I said thank you every time, and every one of them went in the drawer. 14 of them. If you're still with me, and I know this is where people decide whether they want the rest of it, do me one favor and hit subscribe. Because standing on that porch on the 3rd of May, she said something back to me that took the ground out from under the whole thing, and I'd rather tell that to people who stayed. Now, the porch. I said, Corinne, come inside. I need to show you something. And she said, still on the step, still not moving. Is it the drawer? I said, what? And she said, Jean, is it the drawer in the desk? I have been trying for a year and a half to describe what happened in my chest at that moment, and I still can't. She said, I've known since July. July, 10 months. She said, the first couple I didn't notice, because I never look. And then in June, the balance was wrong by a lot, and I thought the bank had made a mistake. And I called them, and they told me how many outstanding checks there were, and I stood in my own kitchen holding the phone. I said, you never said anything. And she said, no, I didn't. And then she said the sentence that is the actual center of this whole thing. Because I needed it, Jean. I needed it so badly that I decided to be the kind of person who doesn't ask. I have thought about that more than anything else anybody has said to me. Because I had spent 14 months feeling, and I'm going to be honest even though it doesn't flatter me, feeling generous, quietly, privately. A man doing a decent thing without being thanked for it, which is a very comfortable way to feel about yourself. And it had never crossed my mind once, in all that time, that on the other end of that arrangement was a woman lying awake working out what kind of person she was becoming. I gave her a gift she could not refuse, and could not acknowledge, and could not pay back. And then I congratulated myself for not making a fuss about it. That's not generosity. I don't know exactly what it is, but it isn't that. She came inside and sat at my kitchen table and told me the rest. Every month since July she had gone to the bank, taken $675 out in cash, and put it in a manila envelope in a shoebox on the top shelf of her closet. 10 months. She hadn't spent $1 of it. And she told me what those 10 months had actually been like, and I'm going to give you some of it, because I'd only ever thought about my half. She said the first 3 months she kept expecting me to say something. Every time she handed over a check, she braced for it. She'd worked out 4 different responses depending on how I brought it up, and I never brought it up, and after a while the not bringing it up became its own thing sitting between them on the porch every month. She said she stopped letting Nell come with her to drop the rent off, because she didn't want her daughter watching her do it. She said in October the car needed a wheel bearing, $410, and she went and sat in her closet with the shoebox in her lap for about 20 minutes, and then she put it back and borrowed the $410 from her sister at 11%. She said the worst part wasn't the money, it was that every single month she had to decide again. It wasn't one choice she'd made in July, it was 10 choices, one a month, and each one was a little easier than the last, and that's what frightened her. She said, I could feel myself getting used to it, Jean. And then she said, the thing I've never been able to argue with. She said, I couldn't use it, because it wasn't mine, and I couldn't give it back, because giving it back means saying out loud that I know. And if I say I know, it stops, and I couldn't afford for it to stop. So we'd both been sitting on the same money, me in a roll-top desk, her in a shoebox, neither of us touching it, neither of us saying a word. 14 months. And then I said, so why today? And she started to cry, which she had not done up to that point, and she said because in March I took $2,100 out of it. Wyatt, 16 years old, an abscessed molar that had gone into the jaw, no dental on her plan, an oral surgeon in Parkersburg who wanted the money up front. She said, I sat in that parking lot for 40 minutes, and then I went in and I paid with your money. And she said, so now the envelope's short, and I can't put it back, and I can't keep pretending, and this month I actually can't pay you, and I've been sick about it since the middle of March. That's why she was on my porch, not because she was broke, because she had finally spent some of it, and she couldn't carry the arithmetic anymore. Then I had to do the hard part, which was tell her why. And I want to be clear that it was hard, and that the reason it was hard is not admirable. It was hard because it required a 49-year-old man to say out loud to a woman 15 years younger than him that when his wife left, she was the only person on earth who noticed. Not the only person who helped. The only person who noticed. That is a different word, and it is a worse one. I told her about the 11 days at the hardware store. I told her about standing at the window watching her take my bins out in the rain. And I said, I couldn't take money off you after that. And I couldn't tell you that was why, because then you'd know what my life actually looked like. So I put them in a drawer, and I let you think I was disorganized. She sat there for a while. Then she said, Jean, I brought you a chicken casserole. And I said, I know. And she said, you can't run a whole year off a casserole. And I said, you'd be surprised what you can run off when there's nothing else in the tank. Here's what we did with it, and I like this part. The house on Warren Street was worth about $78,000 in the condition it was in. I'd had it looked at the previous autumn when I was thinking about selling one of the three. The shoebox had $6,675 in it. I sold her the house on a land contract. $6,675 down, which is the exact number that was in the envelope, and the rest at $490 a month for 15 years, which is less than she was paying me in rent. My accountant thinks I'm an idiot. He may be correct. I'd point out that I now have a payment coming in from somebody who has never in her life been late, and a house I don't have to fix the roof on, and I'd point out that the roof was the next thing. And I tore up the 14 checks. She watched me do it. She asked me to. That was 18 months ago. Wyatt's 18 now and works 2 evenings at the hardware store with me, and he is genuinely bad at it in a way I find very entertaining. Nell is 11. Corinne and I took about a year, and it was a strange year because there is no polite way to go from landlord and tenant to whatever this is, and the entire street had an opinion. Her sister did not speak to me for 4 months. We had dinner properly for the first time last September, and she still brings food over, which I've told her she does not need to do, and she says she knows, and she keeps doing it. There's a foil dish in my fridge right now. Deb's fine, by the way. She's in Columbus. We talk about twice a year, and it's civil, and I hope it stays that way. And she deserved better than what I gave her for 6 years, and I've said so. One last thing. I sat on 14 checks for 14 months and never said a word, and told myself it was kindness. She sat on 10 months of cash she couldn't touch and never said a word, and told herself she had no choice. And between us we made a situation where a woman drove to Parkersburg with $2,100 of money that officially did not exist to get her son's jaw fixed, and then made herself sick about it for 7 weeks. If either one of us had said one sentence out loud in July, none of that happens. So settle it for me in the comments, because we still argue about it. Which one of us was worse? The man who gave without saying, or the woman who took without asking? She says me. I say her. We've been going round on it for a year and a half, and I'll tell you honestly, I think she's right. And if you sat through all of that with me, subscribe. There's a new one every week, and every single one of them is about somebody who could have fixed the whole thing with one sentence and didn't say it. Thanks for sitting with me.